He who laughs last, laughs best. I canceled all the cards after the divorce, and at his wedding with his lover, that was the only phrase I said. My grandmother used to repeat it when I was a girl, and I never truly understood what it meant until I saw Rodrigo's face on the day of his wedding to Valentina. That face of absolute terror, of disbelief, of knowing that his entire castle of lies was crumbling in front of 200 guests dressed in their finest. A single phrase, that was all I needed to destroy the farce he had built over years. A single phrase that made his brand new wife run from the altar, her wedding dress dragging on the floor, while the guests took out their phones to record the spectacle. But for you to understand how I got to that moment, I need to tell you the whole story. I need you to know the woman I was before, the one who let herself be trampled, who believed in romantic love as if it were a religion. And I need you to know the woman I became after, because this story is not just about revenge, it's about awakening. It's about learning that sometimes, to find yourself, you first have to lose everything. My name is Carolina. I am 42 years old, and this is the story of how my ex-husband thought he could take my money, my dignity, and my life, and how I proved to him he was terribly wrong. I met Rodrigo when I was 26, and he was 29. I had just finished my master's degree in business administration and was working as a financial analyst at one of the most important consulting firms in the country. I was ambitious, hardworking, and convinced that professional success was the only thing I needed to be happy. Rodrigo was the complete opposite. He worked as a tennis instructor at an exclusive sports club, one of those places where high society ladies go more to show off their designer bags than to exercise. He was handsome. I can't deny that. He had that kind of classic beauty that seems taken from a magazine, a chiseled jaw, green eyes, a perfect smile, and he knew exactly how to use it. We met at a coworker's birthday party. He was there because he gave lessons to the birthday girl's sister, and I was there because I didn't know how to say no to social invitations that could serve for professional networking. From the first moment, Rodrigo focused on me as if I were the only woman in the room. He flattered me, made me laugh, made me feel special, and I, who had never been particularly good in the romantic arena, fell for it completely. "You're different from all the women I know," he told me that night while walking me to my car. "You're intelligent, independent, you know what you want." I love that. I should have seen the warning sign then. I should have noticed that what he called different was actually convenient. But I was too busy feeling butterflies in my stomach to think clearly. We started dating, and everything seemed perfect. Rodrigo was attentive, affectionate, always available. He brought me flowers at work, prepared surprise dinners, wrote me romantic messages during the day. He was the boyfriend any woman would dream of having, or at least that's what I thought. What I didn't know at the time was that Rodrigo had a pattern he had repeated several times before meeting me. He sought out successful women, professionals, with good incomes. He conquered them with his charm and his looks. And then, little by little, he settled into their lives like an elegant leech, living off their work while he dedicated himself to chasing his dreams. But I would discover that much later. At that moment, I only saw the perfect man. We got married after 2 years of dating. It was a beautiful wedding, paid for almost entirely by my parents and me. Rodrigo contributed with his presence. He said he was saving for our future, that he preferred his money to remain untouched for when we needed it. I, naive as I was, thought that showed how responsible he was. The honeymoon was in the Maldives, a dream trip that cost more than Rodrigo earned in 6 months. But I was so happy, I didn't mind paying. I thought money was the least important thing when it came to building memories with the love of my life. And so our marriage began. Me working 70 hours a week, advancing in my career, earning more and more money. And Rodrigo finding his path. First he left the job at the tennis club because they didn't value him as he deserved. Then he tried to be an independent personal trainer, but the clients didn't understand his methodology. After that, he wanted to start a sportswear business, but the market wasn't ready. Every failure had an excuse, and every excuse ended with him asking me for money for his next project. "It's an investment in our future," Caro, he always told me. When my business takes off, we're going to live like kings. You'll see. I believed him. For 10 years. I believed him. By the time we had been married for 8 years, I was already the financial director of a multinational company. My salary was obscene, my bonuses were generous, and my company stock was worth a fortune. We had bought a huge house in one of the best neighborhoods in the city, had 2 luxury cars, traveled several times a year. From the outside, we seemed the perfect couple. From the inside, I was exhausted. Rodrigo still didn't have stable work. His latest entrepreneurial venture had been a fitness app that never worked, but cost almost $100,000 to develop. Money that, of course, came from my account. You just don't understand technology, Caro, he told me when I questioned the expense. These things take time. Great entrepreneurs also failed before they succeeded. I nodded, as always, because that's what I did. Nod, work, pay, and pretend everything was fine. The worst part was that Rodrigo had developed very expensive tastes. Designer clothes, luxury watches, dinners at exclusive restaurants, and always paid for with the cards in my name that he used as if they were his own. I have to maintain an image, he explained when I asked why he needed another $3,000 suit. How am I going to network if I look like a pauper? I worked from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. He got up at noon, went to the gym, had lunch with business contacts, and spent the afternoons developing strategies. I never knew exactly what that meant, but it involved a lot of time on his phone and many outings he never fully explained. I should have suspected. I should have paid attention to the signs, but I was so tired, so focused on my work, so used to things being that way, that I simply didn't want to see. Until I could ignore it, no longer. The day my world collapsed started like any other. It was a Thursday in March, and I had to cancel an important meeting because I felt sick. Something I ate the night before had disagreed with me, and I spent the morning vomiting. I decided to work from home and told my assistant I would be offline until after lunch. Rodrigo didn't know I was home. He had left early, saying he had a meeting with potential investors for his new project, that this time it was really going to work, that this time it was going to be the big one. I was in bed, trying to rest, when I heard the front door open. I looked at the clock. It was only 11 in the morning. I thought maybe the meeting had been canceled and Rodrigo had come back early. But then I heard laughter. 2 voices. Rodrigo's and another. A female voice I didn't recognize. I froze. My heart started beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me wanted to run out and confront them. Another part, the cowardly part that had spent 10 years ignoring the signs, wanted to stay there hidden and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But then I heard something that chilled my blood. "Oh, my love, finally alone," said the female voice. "I couldn't take having to pretend in front of your friends from the club anymore." "I know, my love," Rodrigo replied with that honeyed voice. "I knew so well, but it won't be long now. The divorce will be super easy. Carolina is so busy with her work, she won't even notice until everything is signed. And then you and I can be together without hiding." I felt the air leave my lungs. Divorce. He was planning to divorce me, and I didn't even know it. "And the money?" she asked. "Are you sure you'll get half?" Rodrigo laughed. That laugh I had loved for so many years now sounded like something from a horror movie. "My love, more than half. My lawyer told me that with the years of marriage and the fact that I sacrificed my careers to support her, I can ask for alimony. We're talking about that fool paying me for years. You and I are going to live like kings on her money." I heard the sound of kisses, clothes falling to the floor, footsteps going up the stairs to the guest room. I stayed there, in my bed, in my house, in the room I shared with my husband, listening to him make love to another woman, 3 doors away. And something inside me broke, but not in the way you might think. I didn't break into pieces. I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. No. Something inside me broke the way a chain breaks, the way a cage breaks, the way everything that has held you prisoner for years breaks. In that moment, lying in that bed, listening to my husband betray me in the worst possible way, I made a decision. Rodrigo wanted to play dirty. Fine. I could play dirty too, and unlike him, I had the resources to win. I waited for them to finish. I waited for them to come down the stairs, laughing and whispering. I waited for them to leave my house, as if they hadn't just shattered my life, and only then did I get out of bed. The first thing I did was check my phone. I had a message from Rodrigo. The meeting ran long. My love, don't wait for me for lunch. I love you. I love you. Those two words, which had once made me so happy, now made me nauseous. The second thing I did was call my best friend, Luciana. Lucy had been my friend since university, and she was the only person who had always distrusted Rodrigo. There's something about him that doesn't add up, Caro, she told me after meeting him. He's too perfect. No one is that perfect without hiding something. I hadn't listened to her. Now I deeply regretted it. Lou, I need you to come to my house, I told her when she answered. Now it's urgent. What happened? Are you okay? No, I replied, but I will be. I just need your help. Luciana arrived in less than 30 minutes. When I told her what I had heard, her reaction was exactly what I expected. That damn son of a bitch, she said, pacing my living room like a caged tiger. I always knew he was a parasite. I always knew it. Caro, you have to destroy him. That's what I plan to do, I said. But I need to do it right. I need to do it in a way he can't defend himself. I need to leave him with nothing when I'm done with him. Luciana looked at me with a mix of surprise and admiration. Who are you, and what have you done with my pacifist friend? I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally awakened. Your pacifist friend died an hour ago, I told her. Now only Carolina is left, and Carolina is very, very angry. The first thing I needed was information. Before making any move, I had to know exactly what I was dealing with. I hired a private investigator. The best I could find. I explained the situation and gave him free rein to discover everything he could about Rodrigo and his lover. I want to know who she is, how long they've been seeing each other, where they meet, what they plan, everything, I said. Money is no object. The investigator nodded. Ma'am, in my experience, men like your husband always leave traces. Give me 2 weeks and I'll have a complete report for you. Meanwhile, I had to act normally. I had to pretend I knew nothing, that I was still the dumb, hard-working wife Rodrigo thought I was. Every time he gave me a good morning kiss, every time he said I love you, every time he asked me for money for his projects, I smiled and nodded. Inside, I was taking notes, saving every lie, every excuse, every piece of evidence of his deceit. I also started reviewing our finances much more carefully, and what I found left me cold. During the 10 years of our marriage, Rodrigo had spent more than $700,000. $700,000 of my money on clothes, trips, restaurants, failed investments, and who knows what else. And he hadn't generated a single cent of stable income in all that time. Worse still, I discovered he had been using the credit cards in my name to buy gifts for his lover. Jewelry, designer bags, reservations at luxury hotels, all while I worked 70 hours a week to maintain our lifestyle. The rage I felt at that moment was so intense, I had to sit down because my legs were trembling. I had been a fool, a complete and utter fool. I had let this man use me for a decade while I paid him for the privilege. But that was going to end very soon. The investigator's report arrived exactly 2 weeks later, as promised, and it was much worse than I had imagined. The lover's name was Valentina Robles. She was 31, a part-time model and social media influencer. Rodrigo had met her at the gym 3 years ago. 3 years. They had been seeing each other behind my back for 3 years. But that wasn't the worst part. Valentina wasn't the first. According to the investigator, Rodrigo had had at least 4 other lovers during our marriage. 4 women he had slept with while I worked to support him. Some lasted months, others only weeks. But Valentina was different. With her, he seemed to have developed something more serious. The report included photos. Many photos. Rodrigo and Valentina kissing in restaurants. Rodrigo and Valentina entering hotels. Rodrigo and Valentina on the beach, during a business trip he had told me was an entrepreneur's conference. It also included messages. The investigator had managed to access some of Rodrigo's conversations, and what I read turned my stomach. "My love, it won't be long now before we get rid of that cow," Rodrigo had written to Valentina 6 months ago. "I just need you to be patient while I prepare everything." "But I'm tired of waiting for you," she replied. "I want us to be together for real. I want to marry you. And we will, my love. I promise you. Just let me squeeze every last cent out of Carolina, and then you and I will have the wedding you've always dreamed of." That cow, that's what he called me. After 10 years of marriage, after giving him everything, after supporting him and maintaining him through each of his failures, to him I was just the cow that needed to be milked. I closed the report and took a deep breath. Tears wanted to come, but I didn't let them. There would be time to cry later. Right now, I had work to do. My first step was to contact the best divorce lawyer in the city. His name was Roberto Fuentes, and he had a reputation for being ruthless. Exactly what I needed. "Mrs. Mendoza," he said after reviewing all the information I had brought him, "your case is quite clear. Your husband has not worked steadily during the marriage, has spent obscene amounts of your money, and you have documented evidence of multiple infidelities. If we play our cards right, you not only won't have to give him anything, but we can recover some of what he has squandered." "I want more than that," I told him. "I want him to be left with nothing. I want him to know what it feels like to have everything taken from you." The lawyer smiled. "I like your attitude. Then let's design a strategy that not only leaves him on the street, but does it in the most public and humiliating way possible." And that's exactly what we did. The first step was to protect my assets. Everything in my name, I moved to accounts Rodrigo didn't know about. My company stock, my investments, my savings, everything was secured. The second step was to cancel the credit cards. All the ones Rodrigo used were linked to my main account. One day, I simply reported them as stolen and asked for them to be canceled immediately. The third step was to change the beneficiaries on my life insurance and pension plan. Rodrigo had been listed as the primary beneficiary for 10 years. With a simple phone call, I removed him from everything. The fourth step was the most difficult, pretending everything was the same. I needed Rodrigo not to suspect anything until I was ready to deliver the final blow. So I kept smiling, kept working, kept paying the bills, but now I did it with a different purpose. Every night, while Rodrigo slept beside me, I planned his downfall. 3 months passed, 3 months in which Rodrigo kept lying, kept seeing Valentina, kept spending money as if it were infinite. 3 months in which I gathered more evidence, more proof, more ammunition for the coming battle. One day, while we were having breakfast, Rodrigo dropped the bomb. "Caro, I need to talk to you about something important," he told me with that serious face he used when he wanted to ask me for money. "Tell me, my love," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship lately, and I think we need some time apart." I pretended to be surprised. "What? Why?" "It's just that I feel we've grown in different directions. You know, you're very focused on your work, and I need space to find myself. I think a divorce would be best for both of us." There it was, the moment I had been waiting for. "I understand," I said, lowering my gaze as if devastated. "If that's what you want, it's for the best, Caro. You'll see, and don't worry about anything. We can do this civilly. My lawyer will contact yours to agree on the terms." His lawyer. The cynical bastard already had a lawyer. He had been planning this for months, while I supposedly knew nothing. "Okay," I murmured. "I'll find a lawyer, and we'll see what we can do." Rodrigo smiled, clearly relieved that I was being so reasonable. He kissed me on the forehead and left to go work out. As soon as he walked out the door, I took out my phone and called Roberto Fuentes. "He asked for it," I said. "It's time to begin." "Perfect," the lawyer replied. "Let the show begin." What followed was a legal battle Rodrigo never saw coming. When his lawyer filed for divorce, asking for exactly what Rodrigo had planned, half of all assets acquired during the marriage, plus compensatory alimony for the sacrifices he had made, my lawyer responded with an avalanche of evidence. Photos of the infidelities, messages where Rodrigo planned to swindle me, records of all the expenses he had made with my credit cards, including gifts for his lovers, statements from people who had seen him with other women, proof that he never had any intention of working or contributing to the marriage. The judge was horrified. "Mr. Rodrigo," he said during one of the hearings, "do you have anything to say about these accusations?" Rodrigo was pale. His lawyer, who clearly hadn't expected me to have so much information, tried to argue that the evidence had been obtained illegally. My lawyer tore him apart. "Your Honor, all this evidence was obtained completely legally. My client has the right to review the statements of credit cards in her name. The photos were taken in public places. The messages were provided by voluntary witnesses. Not all of it was true, but it wasn't a lie either. The investigator had been very careful in how he obtained the information." The result was devastating for Rodrigo. The judge determined that given the pattern of deceit and financial abuse, he was entitled to nothing. Not half the assets, not alimony, not a single cent of what I had worked my whole life to earn. But that wasn't all. Since the credit cards were in my name, technically he had committed fraud by using them without my authorization for personal purposes. My lawyer suggested we could file criminal charges if he didn't sign the divorce agreement without further fuss. Rodrigo signed the next day. In less than 6 months, he went from believing he would get half my fortune to leaving the marriage with absolutely nothing. No house, no car, no money, no reputation. And the best part was that his credit cards, the ones he had used for years to impress his lovers, stopped working overnight. Without my financial backing, Rodrigo couldn't even pay the rent on a decent apartment. But the story doesn't end there. No, the best was yet to come. After the divorce, I tried to move on with my life. I sold the house we had lived in because I couldn't stand the memories and bought myself a new apartment in another part of the city, a place that was just mine, with no traces of Rodrigo anywhere. Luciana convinced me to start therapy, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. My therapist helped me understand why I had let someone treat me that way for so long and how to prevent it from happening again. "The problem wasn't that you trusted him," she told me in one of our sessions. "The problem was that you stopped trusting yourself. You started believing his version of reality was more valid than your own, and that made you ignore all the signals your instincts were giving you." She was right. For 10 years, every time something seemed odd, every time I felt something didn't add up, Rodrigo convinced me I was exaggerating, that I was paranoid, that there was nothing to worry about, and I believed him. I always believed him. But not anymore. A year passed since the divorce, a year in which I dedicated myself to rebuilding my life, to rediscovering who I was without Rodrigo's shadow overshadowing me. And it was the best year of my life. I was promoted at work to vice president of the company. I started traveling alone, something I had never done because Rodrigo always wanted to control our plans. I reconnected with friendships I had abandoned during my marriage. I learned to cook, to paint, to enjoy my own company. And then, one day I received a notification that changed everything. It was an invitation. A wedding invitation for Rodrigo and Valentina. At first I thought it was a joke. Who in their right mind would invite their ex-wife to their wedding with the mistress? But then I understood. It wasn't a real invitation. It was a provocation. A way for Rodrigo to tell me, "Look, I won. Despite everything you did to me, I got what I wanted." Because even though he had lost my money, he had kept Valentina, and apparently they had decided to get married to celebrate their true love. What Rodrigo didn't know was that Valentina came from a wealthy family, very wealthy. Her father owned a chain of hotels throughout Latin America, and her mother was an heiress to an oil fortune. When Rodrigo lost access to my bank account, he simply found another source of funding. Old trick, new target. I looked at the invitation for a long time. The wedding would be in 3 months, at one of Valentina's father's hotels, a ceremony for 500 guests, followed by a reception with food by a famous chef, a live orchestra, and a honeymoon in Bora Bora. All paid for by the Robles family. Of course, my first impulse was to throw the invitation in the trash and forget about everything. Why give more importance to that pair of people who no longer meant anything in my life? But then I remembered something I had discovered during my investigation. Something I had never used because it wasn't necessary during the divorce. Something I had kept as an ace up my sleeve in case I ever needed it. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I called Luciana that same night. "Lou, remember when I told you the investigator had found information about Rodrigo's other lovers?" "Yes, why?" "Remember there was one in particular that was more serious than the others. One he was with for almost a year while we were still married. You mentioned something. That actress? Model. Her name is Mariana. Mariana Vega. And it turns out Mariana and Valentina know each other. They're cousins." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Wait. Are you telling me Rodrigo slept with both cousins?" "Exactly. And there's more. According to what the investigator found, Rodrigo started dating Valentina while he was still with Mariana. He cheated on her too. With her own cousin." "No way." "Yes, way. And here's the best part. Valentina doesn't know. Mariana never told her because they had a huge fight years ago and don't speak. But if someone told Valentina what really happened..." Luciana understood immediately. "Carolina Mendoza, are you planning what I think you're planning?" I smiled. "Rodrigo invited me to his wedding. It would be very rude not to go, don't you think?" The next 3 months I spent meticulously preparing everything. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. First I contacted Mariana Vega. It was easier than I thought. She had been devastated after the Rodrigo situation, and when she found out he was going to marry her cousin, the same one who had stolen her boyfriend, her pain turned to rage. That hypocrite Valentina always knew Rodrigo and I were together. She told me when we met at a cafe. She was the one who got involved in our relationship, and now she's going to marry him, as if nothing happened. As if I didn't exist. "Would you like her to know the truth?" I asked her. "Would you like everyone to know what kind of man she's marrying?" Mariana looked at me with eyes full of tears, and something else. Something I recognized because I had felt it too. The need for justice. "What do you have in mind?" I explained my plan. At first it seemed too risky, too dramatic to her, but the more she thought about it, the more she liked the idea. "Count on me," she said finally. "I'll be there." The second step was to make sure I would have access to the wedding. The invitation Rodrigo sent me was real, so technically I was invited, but I needed to make sure they wouldn't kick me out before I could do what I planned. I discovered that Valentina's mother, a woman named Doña Esperanza, was a fan of charity work. She participated in all the city's charity galas and was always looking for sponsors for her causes. So I made a very generous donation to her favorite foundation, large enough for her to invite me personally to dinner and treat me as if we were lifelong friends. "Carolina, it's a pleasure to meet you," she told me when we were introduced at an event. "I've heard so much about you. You're one of the most successful executives in the country." "Thank you, Doña Esperanza. And I've heard a lot about your altruistic work. What you do for the community is admirable." By the time the wedding day arrived, Doña Esperanza considered me practically part of her social circle. She had no idea I was the ex-wife of her future son-in-law because Rodrigo had never spoken to her about me. To him, I was a closed chapter he preferred to forget. Grave mistake. The third step was the most delicate, preparing myself emotionally, because even though I had everything planned, a part of me was still nervous. What if it went wrong? What if I regretted it at the last moment? What if all this was just a way to prolong my pain instead of healing it? I talked a lot with my therapist about this. "Carolina, revenge rarely brings peace," she told me. "Are you sure this is what you need?" I thought about it a lot before answering. "I'm not doing it for revenge," I said finally. "I'm doing it for justice. Rodrigo destroyed my life, destroyed Mariana's life, and now he's about to destroy Valentina's life. She may be many things, but she doesn't deserve to marry a man without knowing who he really is. And if the only way for her to know is for someone to tell her in public, then so be it." My therapist didn't tell me she agreed with me, but she didn't try to stop me either. The wedding day arrived, a Saturday in October, with perfect weather, bright sun, blue sky, ideal temperature, as if the universe were setting the stage for the spectacle. The hotel where the ceremony was held was spectacular. A remodeled colonial building with enormous gardens, marble fountains, and sea views. Everything was decorated with white flowers, silk ribbons, and crystals that glittered in the sunlight. It must have cost a fortune. I arrived early, dressed in a red dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. I knew it was a bold choice for a wedding, but I wanted everyone to see me. I wanted Rodrigo to see me and know I wasn't broken, that I was better than ever. When I entered the garden where the ceremony would take place, I felt several eyes on me. Some of the guests recognized me, probably from photos they had seen in business newspapers or society magazines. I heard murmurs, but ignored them. I found my place in one of the last rows, near the aisle. From there I could see the altar perfectly, where Rodrigo waited for his bride. He was handsome. I had to admit, he wore a light gray suit that had probably cost more than he earned in a month when he worked. His new father-in-law must be financing his wardrobe now. When Rodrigo saw me, his face was a poem. He visibly paled, then turned red, then tried to compose a neutral expression. But I noticed the panic in his eyes. He didn't expect me to actually come. I held his gaze for several seconds without smiling, without making any gesture, just looking at him, letting him know I was there, and that I wasn't going anywhere. The music began, and all the guests stood up. Valentina appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm, and I have to admit she looked beautiful. Her dress was a work of art, all lace and jewels, with a train that must have been 5 meters long. She carried a bouquet of white roses and a radiant smile. She had no idea what was about to happen. The ceremony began in a traditional manner. The justice of the peace gave his speech about love, commitment, the promises made before God and man. I listened, without really listening, waiting for the right moment. And then it arrived. If anyone present knows of any reason why these two persons should not be joined in marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. A silence fell over the garden. The guests looked around with awkward smiles, as always happens at that moment in weddings. No one expected anyone to actually say something. I stood up. The murmurs began immediately. Rodrigo looked at me with wide eyes, his face a mix of terror and rage. Valentina frowned, clearly confused about who I was and why I was interrupting her wedding. "I have something to say," I announced in a clear, strong voice. The justice of the peace seemed unsure what to do. "Ma'am, this is a very serious moment." "I know," I interrupted him. "That's why I'm speaking, because there are things the bride needs to know before she makes the worst mistake of her life." Doña Esperanza rose from her seat in the first row. "Carolina, what is the meaning of this?" "I thought we were friends." "And we are, Doña Esperanza. That's exactly why I'm doing this. Because you and your daughter deserve to know the truth about the man Valentina is about to marry." Rodrigo took a step forward. "Carolina, I don't know what you're trying to do, but this is ridiculous. You and I ended over a year ago. Get over it." I smiled. "Oh, I got over it a long time ago, Rodrigo. But there are things I never forgave you for, and there are things Valentina deserves to know." I turned to the bride, who was looking at me with a mix of fear and defiance. "Valentina, my name is Carolina Mendoza. I was Rodrigo's wife for 10 years. He cheated on me with at least 5 different women, including you. He spent over $700,000 of my money while pretending to love me, and when he tried to divorce me to get half my fortune, I left him with nothing." The murmurs turned into exclamations. Phones started coming out of pockets and bags, recording everything, but I wasn't finished. However, that's not the worst part. The worst part is that Rodrigo cheated on you too. Before you, he was with another woman for almost a year, a woman who, as it happens, you know very well. I turned toward the entrance to the garden and raised my hand. Mariana Vega appeared at the end of the aisle. She wore a black dress, as if going to a funeral instead of a wedding. She walked slowly toward the altar, her head held high, her eyes fixed on Valentina. The bride's face lost all color. "Mariana?" she whispered. What are you doing here?" Mariana walked up to where I was and stopped. "Hello, cousin," she said in an icy voice. "Surprised to see me, because I am very surprised to see you're about to marry my ex-boyfriend, the one who swore eternal love to me while sleeping with you behind my back." Chaos erupted. Valentina started screaming. Rodrigo tried to explain himself, talking in a rush, saying it was all lies, that I was crazy, that Mariana was resentful. Doña Esperanza demanded explanations, while her husband tried to calm her. The guests didn't know whether to flee or stay to watch the spectacle, and I simply stood there, watching Rodrigo's castle of lies crumble piece by piece. But the final blow was still missing. "Valentina," I said, raising my voice above the noise, "there's something else you need to know. Something Rodrigo has never told you." Everyone quieted down. Even Rodrigo stopped talking, looking at me with genuine terror in his eyes, because he knew what I was about to say. When Rodrigo and I were married, there was a time when we almost had a child. I got pregnant 6 years ago. We were happy, or at least I was. But a few weeks later, I lost the baby. It was devastating. I was depressed for months. My voice trembled slightly, but I continued. What I didn't know, until after the divorce, was that Rodrigo had been relieved when I lost the pregnancy. I found messages where he told one of his lovers that a baby would have complicated everything. That thank God Carolina couldn't carry it. That now he could continue with his plan without distractions. The silence was absolute. I could hear birds singing, the murmur of the fountains, the sound of the wind in the trees. Valentina looked at Rodrigo as if seeing him for the first time. "Is that true?" she whispered. "Did you say that about the baby?" Rodrigo opened his mouth to deny it, but no words came out. His silence was all the confirmation Valentina needed. "You're a monster," she said, stepping back. "You're a damn monster." She took off her engagement ring and threw it in his face. Then she gathered the train of her dress and ran toward the hotel, with her mother and bridesmaids chasing her. Rodrigo was left alone at the altar, surrounded by 200 guests who looked at him as if he were a criminal. Some were already posting videos on social media. By tomorrow, the whole city would know what had happened. I walked slowly toward him until I was only a few centimeters away. "This," I said quietly, so only he could hear, "is for all the times you made me feel I was worthless. For all the lies. For all the nights I spent alone while you were with others. For the baby I lost that you didn't care about. And for having the nerve to invite me to your wedding as if I were going to celebrate your happiness." Rodrigo looked at me with pure hatred in his eyes. "You're going to regret this," he hissed. "I swear you're going to regret this." I smiled. "No, I don't think so. Because unlike you, I have something you will never have, the ability to move on without destroying others. Goodbye, Rodrigo. I hope the rest of your life is as miserable as you deserve." I turned and walked toward the exit. My head held high, and my heart lighter than it had been in years. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The video of the interrupted wedding went viral. I don't know who posted it first, but in less than 24 hours it had millions of views. The media picked it up and turned it into a story. "Woman ruins ex-husband's wedding with a single phrase," the headline said. "Epic revenge at high society wedding." Rodrigo was socially destroyed. The Robles family immediately cast him out of their circle. Without the financial backing of Valentina or any other wealthy woman, he had to face the reality of being a man of almost 40, with no job, no money, and not the slightest idea how to fend for himself. I heard he tried to go back to work as a tennis instructor, but his reputation preceded him. No one wanted to hire the wedding swindler, as he had been nicknamed on social media. Valentina, for her part, took several months to recover from the shock, but eventually, she found the strength to move on. She contacted me about 6 months after the failed wedding, to my complete surprise. "Carolina," she said, when I answered the phone. "It's Valentina. I know this is strange, but I needed to talk to you." I prepared for yelling, insults, threats, whatever. Instead, what I heard was an apology. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "and ask for your forgiveness. I know I was part of your suffering when I was with Rodrigo while you were married. I didn't know everything, but I knew enough to know it was wrong, and yet I did it. I'm sorry." I was speechless for a moment. "Valentina, what I did at the wedding was the right thing," she interrupted. "I know it must have seemed cruel, but I needed to know the truth. If you had stayed silent, I would probably be married to that man right now, not knowing who he really was. You saved me from making the worst mistake of my life." We talked for almost an hour. She told me she had started therapy, that she was working on her own self-esteem issues that had led her to seek validation in men like Rodrigo. And she told me something I will never forget. "You know what's the most ironic thing about all this? My mother always pressured me to find a good match, a man who would give me social status, and in the end the person who helped me the most was a woman who has no obligation to do so. Thank you, Carolina. Really." When I hung up the phone, I cried. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of liberation, of knowing that, despite all the pain, something good had come out of that experience. Another year passed, a year in which I could finally close the chapter on Rodrigo and start a new one. I met someone, his name is Daniel, and he is everything Rodrigo never was: honest, hardworking, independent, and genuinely interested in me as a person and not as a source of funding. We met at a work conference, and our relationship started as a friendship that slowly turned into something more. "Carolina, I like you very much," he told me one night, while we were having dinner at a small restaurant he had chosen, because he loved the food, not because it was fancy. "But I know you went through a lot with your ex. I want you to know, I'm in no rush. If you need time, I understand." I looked into his eyes, those warm brown eyes that hid no secrets or hidden agendas. "Daniel, I spent 10 years with someone who told me exactly what I wanted to hear, who was patient, understanding, who loved me, and it was all a lie. So forgive me if I ask you directly, what do you really want from me?" He smiled. Not that rehearsed smile Rodrigo used to get what he wanted, but a genuine smile, even a little shy. "I want to get to know you. I want to spend time with you. I want to know what makes you happy, what worries you, what you dream of. And if after all that you decide you want to be with me, then I'll be the luckiest man in the world. And if not, at least I'll have had the privilege of getting to know an amazing woman." I didn't believe him immediately. After Rodrigo, I found it hard to trust anyone. But Daniel was patient, consistent, and with time he proved with actions what he said with words. A year after that dinner, we moved in together. Not into my single-girl apartment or his, but to a new place we chose together, a place that would be ours from the start, without the weight of past lives. And 3 months ago, on a trip to the coast, Daniel asked me to marry him. Not with an ostentatious ring or in a 5-star restaurant, but on a quiet beach, at sunset, with the sound of the waves as background music. "Carolina," he said, as he took my hands, "I know marriage can be a difficult subject for you after what you went through, and I want you to know that if you prefer we stay as we are, I understand and respect that. But I also want you to know that for me, there is nothing in the world I desire more than spending the rest of my life with you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" I said yes. Not because I needed a man to be happy, not because I wanted to prove to Rodrigo or anyone else that I had won. I said yes because Daniel makes me feel at home. Because with him, I can be myself, without masks, without pretensions, without fear. Our wedding will be small, only close family and intimate friends. Luciana will be my maid of honor, and Mariana Vega will come as a guest. We've become friends after everything that happened. There's something about sharing a common enemy that creates unexpected bonds. And Valentina will come too. Not as the other woman, not as the rival, but as another survivor. Another woman who learned in the worst way that trusting the wrong person can destroy you, but who also learned that it's always possible to rebuild. Sometimes I'm asked if I regret what I did at Rodrigo's wedding. If it wasn't too much, if it wouldn't have been better to simply let him go and move on with my life in silence. And honestly, there are days I ask myself that same question. But then I remember how I felt before. I remember those 10 years of marriage when there was always a voice in my head telling me something was wrong, but I ignored it because Rodrigo convinced me I was crazy. I remember the sleepless nights, the tears I swallowed so I wouldn't seem weak, the constant feeling of not being enough. And I remember the moment I saw Rodrigo's face at that wedding. The moment he knew his lie was over. The moment when, for the first time in 10 years, I had the power. I don't regret it. I don't regret it because the revenge wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. It was the moment I stopped being the victim and started being the protagonist of my own life. It was the moment I gave myself permission to feel rage, to demand justice, to defend myself. And yes, I could have chosen the path of forgiveness and inner peace. I could have let Rodrigo go on with his life while I healed in silence. That's what they tell us we should do, right? Forgive, let go, move on. But you know what? Sometimes forgiveness isn't enough. Sometimes you need the world to know the truth. Sometimes you need the villain in your story to face the consequences of his actions. Sometimes, just sometimes, revenge is the only way to close a chapter. Rodrigo took 10 years of my life. He took my money, my confidence, my self-esteem, and almost took my hope of finding true love. But what he can never take from me is the satisfaction of knowing I exposed his true face to the world, of knowing he can never again destroy another woman the way he destroyed me. Am I perfect? No. Did I act in a petty and dramatic way? Probably. Would I do it again? Without thinking twice. A few weeks ago, I ran into Rodrigo's mother at the supermarket. I never liked her, to be honest. She always looked at me as if I weren't good enough for her precious son. The irony. When she saw me, her face fell apart. She clearly didn't expect to run into me buying vegetables on a Tuesday afternoon. "Carolina," she said coldly. "What a surprise. Doña Martha," I replied with equal coldness. "How is Rodrigo? I haven't heard from him in a long time." Her expression hardened even more. "As if you cared. Thanks to you, my son is destroyed. He has no job, no money, no one wants anything to do with him. Are you happy now?" I looked at her without blinking. "Doña Martha, your son cheated on me for 10 years. He used my money to support his lovers. He called me the cows behind my back while I worked 70 hours a week to give him the life he wanted. And when I lost my baby, he was glad because he didn't want the complication. So yes, I am happy. I'm happy to be rid of him. And if you think he is the victim in this story, then you are as blind as I was." I turned around and left without waiting for a response. That night, Daniel asked me why I was so quiet. I ran into Rodrigo's mother. I told him. She blames me for her son's ruin. Daniel hugged me. "And how do you feel about that?" I thought about it for a moment. "I feel free," I said finally. "I feel free of not having to pretend anymore, of not having to put up with that family that never valued me. I feel free to be able to tell the truth without apologizing for it." Daniel smiled and kissed my forehead. "That's my girl," he said. "Always telling the truth no matter the consequences." And he's right. That's who I am now. I'm no longer the Carolina who let herself be trampled. I'm no longer the wife who ignored the signs to keep the peace. I'm no longer the victim who believed she deserved the mistreatment. I am Carolina Mendoza, survivor, warrior, woman who learned that her voice has power and that using it is not a flaw, but a virtue. If you're listening to this story and recognize yourself in it, if you're trapped in a relationship where you feel something is wrong but don't dare confront it, I want you to know something. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and you don't have to stay there. I know it's difficult. I know fear paralyzes. I know sometimes it seems easier to keep pretending everything is fine than to face the devastating truth. I know, because I was there. For 10 years I was exactly there. But I promise you that on the other side there is light. There is a life waiting for you, a life where you don't have to ask permission to be yourself, where you don't have to minimize yourself so someone else feels big, where you can wake up every morning and look in the mirror without feeling shame or sadness. You don't have to do what I did. You don't have to plan elaborate revenge or expose anyone in public. That was my way of dealing with my story. but everyone has their own. What you do have to do is one day, even if just one day, choose yourself, listen to that inner voice that tells you you deserve something better, and take the first step, however small, toward your own liberation. Because you deserve it. You truly deserve it. I'm going to end this story with something my therapist told me once, something that stayed engraved in my mind and that I repeat every time I doubt myself. Carolina, she said, the pain you lived through was not your fault. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it, and that doesn't make you dumb or weak. It makes you human. What matters now is not what was done to you, but what you decide to do with it. You can let it define you, or you can use it as fuel to become the person you always wanted to be. I chose the latter, and every day I keep choosing. I am Carolina Mendoza. I am 42 years old. I was the wife of a man who used and betrayed me. I was the woman who interrupted his wedding with a single phrase, and I am the woman who rebuilt her life from the ashes and found the happiness she always deserved. This is my story. And even though it had dark moments, even though there were days I thought I wouldn't survive, I can tell you with complete honesty that I wouldn't change a thing. Because every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt brought me here, to this present where I can breathe without weight on my chest, where I can love without fear, where I can look forward without the past pulling me back. And that, my dear listeners, is worth more than any revenge. Though I must admit, the revenge was pretty good too,